I'm Wesley Bolden,
And I'm Kimberly Bolden.
and I'm the pastor of Tri-Cities Church, and my wife and I are currently foster parents. We've been foster parents for about 4 months.
5 months.
5 months. All right, so our journey into fostering has been interesting. It's definitely had several God moments and points where it felt like God was pointing us in this direction. And it all started with we had purchased a house, and in fact, the house we had before we bought, we didn't have kids, and so we had rooms that just went unused, and so we bought a house, and we got this new house, and it's not a large house. It was three bedrooms, but we still had empty bedrooms in the house, and we started thinking to ourselves, first we started thinking to ourselves, what could we buy to fill up these rooms, and what could we buy to do that was fun,
Or where could we go?
And trips we could take, and then God began to do something in our hearts that convicted us and made us start thinking beyond ourselves and beyond what we could do and buy for ourselves. And I think when I initially had the thought about fostering, I initially said, no, not me. But God kept tugging at my heart about it, and kept tugging at my heart, and he was pretty relentless with it. And over the course of time, I made the decision that my wife and I, had to have a conversation about it.
Well, Wesley brought the idea of fostering to me. It was something that we've talked about flippantly in the past, but without serious thought or conversation. And I'll never forget, we had a conversation around the fire pit one night, just thinking about the different options and how we would go about it. And that is when I realized that, okay, this is really a thing. This is really something that we need to put much thought and prayer and preparation to. And I would say the first feeling that I had was anxiety. The second was disqualification. I felt that I was not qualified to be a foster parent because I had no parenting experience. I had been a teacher, but I hadn't been a parent. So it seemed very intimidating. But as we started the process, one of the things that I could really attest is that God was holding our hand through it. And it wasn't easy, but it was very much clear that God was in it.
Kim said she felt some anxiety, and I had similar anxiety, but for a different reason. I was thinking about how neat and orderly and quiet my house is, and how I like to have things in place and nice and peaceful, and had just gotten used to it just being us, and now there's a little baby in the house that likes to open the kitchen cabinets and pull stuff out and throw it on the floor.
And you're okay with that.
And it's a beautiful thing. Well, one day when I was thinking about it, and I was actually talking to a friend about it, and he encouraged me to go ahead and take that next step, and so I sent a text message to Kim just to make sure, and just said we need to talk about something tonight, and at the same time, God was working on her heart, pulling at her in the same direction, and I didn't know it. And so when we had that conversation that night, we found that God was doing the same thing in both of our lives without us really doing much conversation or talking about it. We felt like that was confirmation. So we decided from that day that we would take the next step.
The first evening that the foster child entered our house, I'll never forget it. The defects transporter literally just said, "Here." And there was...
I was looking for instructions, by the way.
Yeah, there was no manual.
Yeah.
It was basically, okay, go with your gut. There was some anxiety, but there was a lot of excitement. I was excited. I was tired because it had been a long day emotionally. We got the call like 10 o'clock that morning, and by 5:30 that evening, he was in our home and in our arms, and we had to do something with him. So there were a lot of emotions, but I was also very much assured that we would be okay. And one thing that I absolutely love about that first evening is that our church family showed up. We had different faces show up throughout the afternoon, checking in, asking if we needed anything, even just coaching us through the first night. So we realized that he was in community and we were not alone. So it was reassuring.
So through the whole process of thinking about fostering, and the process was long with the paperwork and applications.
7 months.
And some things kind of got hung up with background checks and all that kind of stuff. Just things just taking longer than we expected. But we did learn in the end that God's timing was perfect. But our whole prayer through the whole journey was that God would be with us, because we were a little nervous and had a little anxiety, and so our thing was, God, please be with us through this. Please be with us with this. Like, if you called us to this, go with us, go before us. And then when we finally get that call about a little boy that needed a home, and we asked the name, and they said his name was Emmanuel, which of course in the scriptures is a name that's used for Jesus, which means God with us. God's present with us. And there was nothing that could be more reassuring than that moment when the lady said over the phone, his name is Emmanuel. It confirmed that God was really I guess that we had really heard God's voice right, and that He really was calling us in the way that we felt that He was, and so it took some of that anxiety and fear away.
And I'll never forget, too, even before we knew who was going to come into our house, we were reading this book called Adopted for Life by Russell Moore. And we would pray. And one of the prayers we prayed specifically is that this child would be a joyful child. You know, we know that being in foster care is pretty traumatic. There's a lot of trauma. These kids are coming out of various situations, and it's heartbreaking. You know, their families miss them. They miss their families, but we prayed for joy. And every day we have confirmation that God hears us, because Emmanuel is so full of joy.
He smiles all the time.
All the time.
And smiling's my favorite.
He smiles all the time. I mean, we spoke to his teacher today, and she said he is always happy. So, you know, it's a prayer answered.
Yeah, and I'll never forget, it's just a side story. I'll never forget, I'd never changed a diaper before in my life, so that shows you how little I knew about caring for a baby. And so I had never changed a diaper. And I remember Emmanuel comes in the house, into our care, and I was a little worried about that diaper, and I was actually kind of prayerful that it wouldn't be one of those big ones, and I remember changing my first diaper, and never in my life have I felt so accomplished. I felt like I had done something that was really meaningful. As a lot of couples, when they first get married, we were on the 5-year plan, and I was in school, and we moved several times and just weren't real settled in life. And so we were definitely on the 5-year plan, and we knew it was going to take the whole 5 years before we were ready to have kids. And when we moved back to Atlanta, 5 years came, and we began trying to have children, and it just wasn't happening. And we felt like at that time that maybe that was God saying to us that He had another plan. And you know, it's easy for us to sink into either worry or anxiety or fear of not being able to fulfill maybe our own hopes and dreams. But we felt like God was saying that He had another plan, and not just for us, but for another child's life. And so I won't say it was easy, but it felt like the whole time that God was going before us.
Yeah. You know, and as a woman and as a wife, I would admit it was pretty hard for me. Especially being, you know, the wife of a church leader who we lead a church where the children's ministry is vibrant. You know, and to be one of the few women here that have been married and without kids, you know, ever so often I would think about it. You know, but one of the things that I resolved, and I said this to God, is that, you know, even if you don't, you're still good. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot, because I literally had to put my plan, my hopes, my dreams, my heart in His hand and trust Him and trust His purposes. You know, and I remember January 1st, 2012. I'll never forget it. We were living in Princeton, New Jersey at this time. And it was the turn of the new year, and I had this dream. And I remember telling it to one of my girlfriends, and she was like, "You just need to take that dream and just hold it dear to you." But in this dream, it was like I was fighting God, and I'm not sure what I was fighting God with, but in the midst of the dream, like he stops me and hands me this boy child, like this child. And I got up. You know, I really didn't understand it. It didn't make sense. But now looking back, I don't want to say that, you know, this is directly correlated to that. It reminds me that, you know, all good gifts come from God. And Emmanuel is a good gift. He's a good gift to his mom. And he's a good gift to us while he's in our space and in our presence and in our home. And we thank God for him. So I have seen God work through all of it, especially in just molding and healing my heart.
So about 3 months into our fostering experience, we got a call about Emmanuel's brother, who was 8 years old. And while a baby can only do so much damage, I think we were a little bit more concerned about being the parents of an 8-year-old. And but we thought about it and prayed about it, and we said yes to God first, and then yes to a little boy coming into our home, and it came with challenges I think that were unexpected for us, and not so much challenges necessarily as parents or challenges in the home, but it was interesting to see the way he came with a lot of, I guess, baggage and trauma from his past that caused him to act out in ways that were hard for people within his community to deal with. And so it became I was up at the school a lot, checking on him and meeting with his teachers and principals. So when Emmanuel's 8-year-old brother came into our home, he did come with some challenges that we were really unequipped to deal with, and not so much. It wasn't a patience issue. It wasn't really a parenting issue. It was just the trauma that he had been through and the hard space he was in his life, and I think to some degree, and I think we would agree on this, is I think to some degree we had our hopes up that this boy would come into our house and we'd love him and see him just totally turn around and leave a different boy than he came in as, and that didn't happen, and I think we had to sit back and deal with that kind of emotionally and be in that space of feeling like almost feeling like we weren't successful, like we didn't weren't adequate, and so kind of still in the process of thinking through that and processing through that and what that means. Yeah. But are sure that God is still calling us and that He's still faithful.
Having Emmanuel's older brother in the home, I mean, it was a joy. You know, he was rambunctious. He was helpful. He loved playing with the dogs.
And asking questions. He read to us in the car. You know, every day was a new adventure. And, you know, he had grown to become a part of our home and part of our family. And, you know, I'll never forget, you know, the first night he came into our house, you know, me praying with him. And him asking from then on for me to pray with him, you know, when he went to bed. And we were able to set up a routine. And there was some expectation there, and there was some hope, you know, but the reality is that many of these kids come from hard places, and even though they're no longer in those hard places and they're in safe spaces, the hardship shows itself in many ways, you know, and one of his greatest struggles was at school, and he experienced a lot of triggers, and what it did for me is that it humbled me. And I had to realize that when it comes to foster care, we are not in the business of saving anyone. God does the saving. We are to make ourselves available and love these kids. Simply love these kids and be
be a safe place for these kids. And when he had to leave, it was a sad day. It was a sad day in our home. And for me, it felt like an amputation or a loss because he was part of us. But also trusting that God has a plan for his life, and there's so many other factors at work, and still praying for him and praying that he gets the help that he needs, and realizing that consistently that as we continue to love these kids, we're going to have some times where there's some success and there's some learning moments, and there are a lot of learning moments, and taking it as they come.
I'm learning that I don't know it all. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I knew that I didn't know it all, but not internalizing those. God has reminded me from the very onset that he is God, and he is sovereign, and he's in control, and that he provides, and that he loves these kids so much more than we do. And he loves us so much more than we could even understand and articulate. And that there are times that we mess up and we make mistakes, but it does not change his view of us. He sees so much more. And as I look at Emmanuel in our home, and I watch the way that he's growing, and getting into the toddler stage, and seeing the world in awe and wonder, I can't help but to think God has something more in store, not just for us, but for him. And it reminds me that it is okay to feel unqualified, but to remember that if we are constantly obedient, that God is never going to disappoint. So it's walking with God and saying the little yeses along the way that make the difference.
And God has changed our relationship because he's given me the opportunity to see my wife as mama, the great mama that she is. And I love that. She's a good mama.